Sorry about that. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today for our panel on combating LGBTQ and youth homelessness. My name is Eliot Olson. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am the trans, non-binary, and intersex program officer at the New Haven Pride Center. You see right below my email if you want to reach out to me. Before we begin today's program, we'd like to take a moment and to acknowledge the land on which we are hosting this event. The New Haven Pride Center was founded and operates on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket, Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Shawgatikoke, Golden Hill, Paugussett, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac peoples. We hope that from wherever you are, you take a moment to acknowledge and honor the Native peoples whose land you occupy and the history of the place you are in. Find out more about Native lands at native-land.ca. Now, I'm excited to welcome you to today's program. During our last conversation, we talked about the realities and plights that lead to queer and trans, and specifically youth homelessness. In our follow-up discussion, we will talk about resources within the community and share some collective efforts being made in Connecticut right now to help the queer community and the trans community, and specifically youth, as well as how we are fighting now to address this problem that's disproportionately affecting Connecticut. Before we begin, I do want to take a moment and thank our sponsors who made today's program possible. Thank you to Connecticut Humanities for all of your support. Your support helps facilitate important conversations like this one. If you would like to know more about sponsoring programs like these, please feel free to reach out. I would also like to take a moment to thank Nick for coordinating our ASL interpreting, and all of the amazing interpreters, such as Christopher and Simone today, Simone on screen with me, that we work with to make our programming more broadly accessible. Awesome. Let's jump in and introduce our panelists today. Hello.
Hi, my name is Keana Bulau, and I'm a mental health worker, and I'll just be serving on the panel today with other cool people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Mel. I run Q+, and I've been working with queer youth at a few other agencies for the past, lifetime, I guess.
Thank you for joining me. I'm really looking forward to this. So it's great to have you here, and I'm excited about the different perspectives and experiences you can bring to the table. For everyone who's watching, we have one more panelist who's running a tad behind schedule, and in all the snow, I totally understand. So we're just gonna carry on, and he should be joining us just in a little bit. So I guess to kind of start off the conversation, going from a really broad question, how have you supported at-risk and homeless LGBTQ youth in the larger community, professionally, privately? Like how has that been part of your life? And anybody can take a shot at the question, although I'm not afraid to call on people.
You want to go first?
Go if you want. We're gonna both be that person. We're like, oh no, I'll go next.
Okay. Yeah. Well, specifically for me, my advocacy work and activism within the LGBT community really began like around my freshman year of college. So I went to the University of New Haven, which is located in West Haven, ironically. And so my activism began in our Pride Club, and then we had a club specifically for people who were non-binary or trans. And so I was also involved in that advocacy work. So the club that was more focused on gender, we did a lot more policy work and discussions. And then the Pride Club was just kind of an event-based club. So we did more programming and less policy work within the school. And so on our campus, through our policy work, we were able to do things like make sure there are gender neutral we actually got gender neutral housing in the dorms. We were allowed to we implemented a gender neutral bathroom in every single building on campus. We were able to get name changes on ID cards, and just general policy work and advocacy in terms of if any type of harassment happened. You know, we were there to, you know, let people know we're not standing for that.
Step in, yeah. No, totally. That sounds amazing. Mel, how about you?
I have a very similar story from college, only at Central, but we formed the 1 in 10 committee there, but we did a lot of the same work of like getting housing in place because they weren't letting, you know, oh, pick a gender or you can't be here kind of thing. Like we did a lot of that, a lot of the name change program, getting the bathrooms in every building that's been built since then. So I'm like, oh, we need to swap stories later. Like that sounds like fun to me.
Yeah, we also did on the rosters, like in classes, we were also like advocating for that to get name changes on Blackboard too. So that was
which a lot of those things aren't hard to fix. It's just no one's asked them to fix them. Yeah. But yeah, I would say that was a good intro to queer youth homelessness because it was very normal for a lot of our Pride kids to be sleeping on everyone else's couch. And that didn't count as homelessness and that didn't count as a problem, but it was a problem. And it was such a normalized problem that we didn't see it as a problem. We saw it as like, oh, college is fun. That's why I have a mattress in my living room. Like it was just so normal that we didn't even think about it as an issue. And now I work with like queer teenagers mostly, and that's almost still the same thing. There are a lot of kids sleeping on a mattress in their friend's living room. I've worked with a lot of kids like that. I've worked with kids who are living in their cars. Most of my work working with queer teenagers has been working with kids that the system has kind of thrown out or kind of pushed to the side. Because if you're 17 and a half, you don't count. You're not a homeless adult or a homeless kid. And it's very easy to like be pushed to the side until you fall into that gap, and then they can ignore you forever. So a lot of my work has been working with kids in that weird gap of like, I don't qualify for the 16 and under like emergency programs. I'm not old enough to go to a shelter because those are 18 and up. Sometimes I'm non-binary and I can't go into a women's shelter or a man's shelter. So I've been working a lot with kids that are kind of falling into those gaps, more of on an individual basis than like a policy basis.
I want to take a moment also to point out something that you were both saying, just about how normalized it's kind of become. Also having been homeless when I went to college and like sleeping in the library or, you know, finding a 24-hour building, or a floor or couch, whatever, like, it's just, you know, this is how it is. And I think, you know, we can become complacent through our own kind of just processing of the traumatic experience that's happening because we normalize it for ourselves. Yeah, absolutely, Joe. Sorry, I have to look up close to read it. So actually that kind of leads me into one of my next things I wanted to talk about. Connecticut is considered a really blue state, right? We're considered progressive. just nationally, it's not below the Mason-Dixon line. So taking that in mind, Connecticut also has some of the highest rates of LGBTQ youth homelessness specifically, which seems contrary to that reputation. So I was wondering, what do you think are some kind of common misconceptions surrounding housing and like homophobia and transphobia in Connecticut specifically?
I'll just go. So originally, just for a little background, I'm from New York, and so also New York is another state it's a very blue state, and people think with blue states it's very liberal and progressive, but that's not necessarily the truth. New York also has its issues when it comes to like the LGBT community and LGBT homelessness. So I think the issue with like Connecticut is that the services for homelessness in general, and the whole process to go through, like if you're homeless, and the qualifications are so limited in terms of who gets access to what, and the spots are limited in general. So my background is I work with homeless young adults in a transitional living shelter, but basically there are certain qualifications that you have to be considered homeless. So if you're sleeping on a couch, you're not considered homeless. If you're sleeping in your car, you're not considered homeless. So you would not actually qualify for any transitional living program or certain programs. And then and then you add a layer onto it, it gets even worse. There aren't really any programs specifically made for like the LGBT community. I think there's only about one program in the state that is LGBT based, where it's housing for homelessness. But and I don't know anything about the details of it, but so I think the resources are very limited. The amount of support out there in Connecticut that is transparent is very limited, and I think support in general is limited.
For sure, yeah. Mel, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was like, we're gonna build off each other a lot. I like that. Connecticut's blue on paper, and we're really good at doing things on paper. Like, not just Connecticut, this is a problem everywhere, but we're really good at looking good on paper and technicality-ing our way, like, right out of helping people. So just to echo some of that, but like, if you sleep on a couch once in the past 90 days and you're on the street every other night, you're not technically homeless, you're unstably housed, and that's a different problem, not an emergency. It's wild the hoops we make people jump through and the justifications we provide for why being homeless is okay. Like, it bothers me a lot. Because there are all those technicalities, all those hoops, and all those ways to disqualify folks from programs, not that there are enough programs or enough resources anyway. I don't remember where else I was going with that, so I might just leave it there.
Also, another thing is a lot of the programs, they have requirements, and also the staff may not be LGBT inclusive. I've worked at programs. I worked at a group home, a DCF group home, where we did have a kid who was gay, and the staff were being openly homophobic to me. Like, they were saying things like, "Oh, that client is only that way because they never had guidance. They never had a male figure in their life," or things like that. And so those are also, people don't realize the people who are also staffing these programs, a lot of the times they aren't as open-minded as or progressive as we need them to be. They aren't as compassionate and empathetic as we need them to be. And also, I mean, that is because a lot of workers are burnt out, or they're burnt out, they're apathetic, but at the same time, I think it's still a disservice. We shouldn't have people in the field who are further traumatizing people already in a vulnerable and traumatic situation. And so that's also a big thing. And also I was going to say things of like the difference between being homeless. If you get kicked out of your program, if you've only been homeless once, you don't qualify for any other program because you're not chronically homeless. You have to be homeless like a couple times to be chronically homeless. So there's also other loopholes with it too.
It seems like loopholes upon loopholes. Like, I'm not sure how, you know, and I've been hearing a lot about this for the last couple talks that have been going on around homelessness in the queer and trans community. And just like, there's so much verification of the status that goes into accessing any kind of help. And you would think that, you know, just showing up cold and hungry would be enough. But, you know, I guess you have to have it on paper as well, since we know Connecticut is a paper state.
Well, I know, like, for my job, like, in order to stay at my residential, you have to be actively seeking employment and get a job, or you have to enroll in school. So if you don't do any of those, they kick you out and, like, you're back on the street. So, you know, there also are rules and guidelines that easily permit people to kick homeless people out of the shelters that we do have.
Yeah. Like, they're so focused on compliance and the loopholes and the rules and the papers. Like, it's not about the person in front of you. Like you said, showing up cold and hungry should be enough. And that's like item number 90 on the list of boxes to check before you qualify. They're like, oh, are you hungry and cold? They're like, oh, interesting. Like, we don't care. Like, that's not what matters on paper. What is your address? That's what you need. And I also wanted to jump back on something you said before, if that's okay, if we can jump around.
Yeah,
my brain jumps everywhere. But you had mentioned working at a group home. And I just want to, while we're here, emphasize that being a queer teenager in a group home is a special kind of hell. Can I say that? I've worked with a lot of queer kids in a lot of group homes, and they are set up to fail from the beginning. Like, homophobia, transphobia isn't just real, it's aggressive, and it's out here, and it's kicking these kids. Like, there's a pipeline into prison, there's a pipeline into homelessness, because those kids are set up to fail. They're put into situations they cannot get out of, and then they're blamed for it. And that happens over and over again. I don't know how in depth I want this rant to go, but I feel like we need to at least acknowledge that that is real and that's happening. So, like, we look at the percentage of kids who are homeless, like the percentage of youth who are homeless, there's way more queer folks represented than compared to the general population. And it's not just that kids come out to their parents and get kicked out. That's kind of the, like, narrative we share, but it's also that programs are built on homophobia, transphobia, etc., that push those kids out of those programs and, like, hand it to, like, you know, the cishet kids who are more deserving in the eyes of those systems. It's a huge problem, and it's a problem that does not get acknowledged nearly enough.
Since we're kind of talking about the bureaucracy of all of this, and the ways that's kind of constraining the limited resources that I just saw Raven, sorry, that are available. I kind of want to pick your brains about what kind of changes do you think would need to happen to address the problem? Because we know homelessness disproportionately affects the queer and trans community. We know it's especially bad for kids. And I've said this before, but I'll say it again. The visibility of the LGBT community is not the same as the support for that community. So even though you might see Laverne Cox on the cover of Times, that does not mean that you are necessarily safe to come out. It does not mean that you're safe to come out at work. Parents, it's a Occam's razor kind of situation. We're almost there, but we still have a long way to go. So kind of thinking of that in the background, what kind of changes do you think need to happen so, like, this specific problem can be addressed, you know, not only by the community, because we're all aware of it, but, you know, larger structures like the city and the state?
Well, I just feel like there really needs to be a major radical change in terms of like the way that like we don't even have, and I understand that diversity trainings don't even work essentially, but we don't even have staff members who get proper training. Also, it depends on the agency. So a lot of nonprofits, they hire entry level because they don't want to pay a lot of money. So they pay you $12, $13 an hour, and they hire anybody to work with vulnerable populations. And so that's also where we see people not knowing how to handle certain situations because they don't have that mental health training. They aren't trauma informed. They are not aware of the LGBT community or the things that they go through. And so there's just, you know, a gray area where I've been on a lot of job interviews where people go, "Oh my God, you know about the LGBT community? That's like where we really need help." And because a lot of those agencies, the leaders of those agencies, so the directors and things, they're people who are, you know, older people in their 50s, 60s, late 40s. And so a lot of times there's also like cliques that go on in these fields and these agencies and nonprofits. And so a lot of times things get swept under the rug because, you know, that's my friend, or, you know, I know them 10 years. We even had issues. I know Juan didn't join us yet, but I used to be the old quest coordinator, which Juan is now. And even then, we had issues with those agencies where they were kind of fighting over who could have who could have the trans support group in the area, and
there can only be one.
Yeah, and so they were like competing and battling to be the agency that, you know, leads in having a trans support group, and so there's so much. I feel like there's so many layers to it. There's so many things that we need to unpack and you know, get to the bottom to. But also, I think we need to also put money in you know, LGBT people's hands, because a lot of those positions, like when I worked at Quest, I'm not sure how Quest is now, but I was told to do programming for the LGBT community, to invite people in with no budget. So they didn't want me to pay anybody. And so I think those are also the issues, is like they want our representation, they want our face, they want to say they're inclusive and they're a safe space, but they don't want to actually pay us and ensure our safety.
No, I think that says a lot right there. That, you know, I want your face to be part of this. I want to tagline that, but I don't want to actually go further. But speak of the devil, we are now just joined. Juan, if you want to introduce yourself, feel free to go right ahead.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I'm late. This weather is not that great for driving. My name is Juan Fonseca Tapia. My pronouns are él, he, him. And as Keana was actually just mentioning, I am the coordinator for Queer Unity Empowerment Sport Team, also known as Quest.
So just to catch you up for the moment, the question that I just asked, and sorry for repeating it again, but we're just kind of talking about, you know, what kind of structural changes need to happen within the city and the state to actually make them more aware of the problem. Like, you know, within the queer and trans community, we all know about it because either it's our life or it's our friends' lives. You can't kind of not come into contact with it. But these larger places that house the resources, they don't seem to either know or care. So, I don't know. Do they know and they don't care? Or do they care and they just have no money? I don't think it's that one.
Well, I think that there are one of the major factors is they do know, right? But I think that most of especially talking about in our communities and at the state level, the people that have written the policies around housing, healthcare, all of those policies were not written around our needs, and we were not represented when those policies or those systems were created. So I think that's where part of the issue stems from, and the fact that we still don't have any kind of representation, or very little representation, when people are coming together to either create policy or try to fix systems that have been around for a while. Like, for example, DCF, or the Commission of Children, Family, and Seniors, right? It's like, we have these agencies and these commissions in the state, but have we actually had representation, and have we had lawmakers or policymakers or advocates involved in the process of creating those policies? So I think that the answer is no, because I feel that if more people that, as you said, have experienced homelessness and have been through these things, if we are in those spaces, at that point, they cannot ignore us, because again, we're already on those spaces. So that is, I think that I like the fact that you're bringing it to the state level, because at the end of the day, we can take care of our communities, right? And we can come together and create these networks of mutual aid that we have been seeing popping up around the state. But at the end of the day, we have a government for a reason, right? So we should...
I would like to think.
Yes. Yeah, so we should be pushing for that.
No, for sure. And it's interesting kind of listening to everybody's response. Although I haven't heard your thoughts yet, Mel, on policy structure, and I'm curious.
Adam.
Yeah, I'm sure. But I just want to pause on a moment of lack of representation when the policies are being made. I think that's an important point, in that, if this isn't something, benefit of the doubt, that policymakers are aware of, representation is the first step towards that. Mm-hmm. Now, that's kind of a very vanilla first step, I think, in a way, not in a bad way, but just like it's a very good rational first step, and I'm kind of curious what Mel has to say, because I feel like they have something in mind that's maybe a bit more in your face, in a good way. 100% in a good way.
In your face in a good way is going on my business card, first of all. So thank you for that. I think we're not represented in those spaces, and that's by design, right? We are pushed out. Like, we are not paid for our time. We are not welcomed to be part of the people who set the policies to serve our people. And that's on purpose. So that's an issue. I think we're way too tolerant of bigotry in those types of spaces. Like you mentioned before about, like, does diversity training even work? I don't know. I mean, I do it, book me, pay me, but I don't know if it works long term. But what I do know is that I have heard a bazillion times, oh, well, she's new to the LG thing, or like, well, she's never met a trans before. I don't care. Your job is to help the person in front of you. You don't need to get it. Help the person in front of you. And if you don't, then that shouldn't be your job anymore. Like, that's the line we need with staff, with people connecting people to programs, all of it. And instead of that, we're still so tolerant of people not understanding us and therefore not helping the people who go to them. And that's not okay. That needs to stop. I think maybe a tool to be helpful in that is make it reportable. If places have to report, like, oh, well, we turned away 17 trans people this year. they're going to be a lot more careful about turning away trans people for being trans if they have to publicly say that's what they did. Looking at you, Salvation Army. I said it, I'm sorry. It's different. Anyway, beyond that, the policies, procedures, all of this stuff, we need to ditch all the hoops. We need to stop making people prove that they're homeless enough to need help. We need to stop making kids relive their trauma or relive their abuse to justify why they ran away or why they're not with their foster parents anymore. We need to stop making trans kids prove their gender to access gender segregated spaces, because that is wildly intrusive. And we need to ditch that compliance piece. A lot of queer homeless folks are neurodivergent or struggling with some kind of other health issues. We can't just go get a job. Being homeless is the job. It takes so much time and so much effort. And if you are dealing with other health issues on top of that, if you are a person who communicates or processes in a different way where you're not going to be employed very easily in places that other folks can apply, that's not okay to just assume that we can. So a lot of us are dealing with that. All people who are homeless are traumatized, and they're all dealing with that trauma. So instead of being hey, get a job, what we should be attaching is talk to this therapist that we are providing you. It's wild that we say, you do tricks for us. We should be saying, here's the shelter that you need to live, and here are the other resources you need to build yourself back up into a place where you don't have to need these resources anymore. It's wild that we switch that script and instead say, you do tricks for us, we're not helping you. That's not okay. That entire system needs to get flipped around. So that's my rant.
No, thank you. And it's not a complete rant per se. Just meaning that, I think that's too demeaning a word. There's a lot of good points there, and I'm kind of having trouble which one I want to pick. But yeah, I think definitely the script being switched is crazy in that, you have to put extra work in if you're extra harmed. And that just doesn't make any sense in any way. Again, to access the resources you need to no longer be harmed. It's a really wonky system. Best rant. I saw a couple of people commented, and I saw them pop up about the pit count. I don't know anything about that, and if any of y'all do, feel free to jump in, just for information's sake. No worries.
What was it?
Oh.
So I'm actually familiar with that, because that is something that we are, Quest is trying to collaborate on with all the different agencies that work to count all the people that are experiencing homelessness. And I also saw some of the comments, and that count always takes place in January, which is, again, by design. And because it's the winter, it's harder to actually find the people that experience homelessness, right? It's more likely for us to come across those folk during the summer, because they don't have to be worried about the fact that if they sleep in a park, they're gonna freeze to death. So that is actually one of the things that I am advocating for, and I am pushing all of these agencies to change the time when we're doing the count. But just to go into that, and I'm not sure if you all touched on this, is I think that when we're talking about the experiences that we have had, the trauma, I mean, people that have experienced homelessness have to literally dehumanize themselves. And this goes with anybody that needs any kind of support from the state or agencies, from the government, that all of these systems that are in place to provide aid, force people to dehumanize themselves to prove the needs that they are experiencing. So that is one of the things that we have to change. And Mel, I am totally for like, let's take it down. But like I also want to be realistic, and I don't like to romanticize things. But trust me, I am the kind of person that is like, reforming does not work. Let's burn it down and build something new. But until then, I know that there is a system that unfortunately I have to be part of and play with. And as I said, if I have the opportunity to be in those spaces, take those spaces and influence as much as I can, and use my voice to, again, try to inform people that are in those spaces, or push for change within the systems that we already have.
I kind of want to steer us, because we're about 10 minutes over the halfway mark. So I kind of want to steer us towards some other questions. And I guess I'll start off with, since everyone here in some capacity works with unstably housed or homeless queer community in some way, or has some experience that way, who do you think is at the highest risk of homelessness for the queer and trans community? And I have a feeling that we all kind of know the answer, but I feel like it's still important to point out specifically. And again, this is an open floor thing, so just jump in when you want to.
You gonna go now? No? Okay, I'll go. So I think mostly the most at risk, I guess the most at risk population of the community is probably trans people, gender nonconforming people, but specifically Black and people of color. So, and also with the pandemic, we also know that in general, Black people and people of color have been struggling at the highest rates. So, I would only believe that it's extra stressed now with everything going on, and also because they also are the most at risk because the lack of resources and the danger of trans misogyny and transphobia just in being in the streets, and even when it comes to finding a job, especially now, and employers right now they're acting up. So so people are probably even more at risk. So employers are laying people off left and right, firing people, and just taking part in very unethical actions in terms of with the COVID, and not telling people if coworkers are sick and things like that. So I think it just puts the community even more at risk.
Would you two agree with that, or do you think it's another part of the community?
No, I mean, there is nothing else to say, especially black trans folks. And I actually was on a meeting the other day, and something that was pointed out to me with DCF and youth that come in contact with them is Asian people are, by the systems, are considered people of color. However, they don't get Asian youth don't get placed in foster homes as much as specifically Black and brown folk, right? So yes, we use this umbrella term to refer to people of color, but I definitely think that specifically Black and brown, because again, everything that Keana said, the transphobia, the homophobia, the anti-Blackness, all of those things intersect, and yeah.
No, I think you really hit it on the head. Kind of everyone. It's when you have all these compounding lines and when they intersect, it's like, I'm going to offend you, but I'm going to offend you in 5 different ways. And so, the more ways I can, the more will happen. Because maybe this way for that person, but not that way for this person. And yeah, I think if I'm remembering this correctly, the life expectancy specifically for Black trans women is 35 years old, which is insane. That's beyond a housing issue. That is just a life expectancy issue, and is a separate panel. But no, I think when we're looking at housing and homelessness and seeing who needs it the most, we need to know who is the most at risk, and not just in housing, but in like safety.
I saw a comment. Someone mentioned something about people who have HIV and AIDS. So I would definitely add like people who are chronically ill, people who have disabilities. That's even harder, because even now they can't get access to proper medical treatment, because now facilities are full capacity, or they're running at half the capacity that they used to run at because of COVID. And now when it comes to applying for those government assistance in terms of disability and all of that, I know that the process now takes 10 times longer. It can take 10 times longer because everything is so backed up and overwhelmed right now.
No, I think in a lot of the ways, our community has, especially as younger folks are coming in and kind of maybe taking over some leadership roles, the AIDS crisis of the 80s is losing its vibrancy, and how much it harmed the community. And again, I think that's purely a generational thing, and it's important. And thank you for bringing that up, because I didn't catch that comment. But I think it's really important to keep reiterating our own stories so we don't leave that to be forgotten in any way. So we're about 15 minutes out from closing.
Eliot, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Just to add something to that, because
Go for it.
You're saying that it's important to always make sure that we state who are those folk. I think that oftentimes we don't mention immigrant trans folk, right? That those people either on their journey to make it to the U.S. or while they're in the U.S., there is just another facet of their identity that, as you said, makes them more vulnerable for people and our culture and the systems to target them. So yeah.
No, thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely. Again, we need to be super aware of who in our community is most at risk, safety wise, because housing is a safety issue in every way. So in our last 15 minutes or so, I was wondering if I could kind of step away from the questions for a moment and just maybe talk a little bit as a group about either ways people can get involved in helping, certain resources that you maybe want to boost more that you think are good specifically for anybody who is unstably housed and part of the queer and trans community. I just, the panel settled combating homelessness, and I really want to end on a note that, like, we see all of these problems, we're talking about how hard it is and why it happens. But how do we start doing this? Reforms, burning it down, either way, what are some of the channels that we can start going down? And if this isn't your professional life, right, if this isn't something that you do for money, how can it become part of just a community member's daily life in a way, or something that they go and volunteer their time for? But total free form, just for the last little bit.
I think I have two things to like add, and I don't know if this is entirely answering what you just said.
No worries.
I think one thing that we don't think about how powerful it can be, but it can be pretty powerful, is fighting misconceptions just among ourselves and in our community and with our people. One thing I don't think we talked about too much here that's really relevant, specifically for trans folks who are experiencing this, is this narrative that we like choose to be homeless. Because, well, you could just go back into the closet and go into the men's shelter, and you're choosing not to. No. Because the choice is between being homeless on the street and being yourself, or being in danger and living someone else's life in a shelter that's not built for you. That's not a choice. And I think that needs to just be acknowledged and talked about, because we put people in a situation, and then that's victim blaming, right? Like, there's a word for this already, of just being like, oh, well, you chose that. Like, you chose to leave like your abusive parents' house because they won't accept you for who you are, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, I chose to live, and there's no other way for me to live except for this. And I think that needs to be acknowledged more. In terms of resources, I wish, like, I've got a list, but the whole list is call this number and they'll get back to you in 3 weeks. Like, the resources aren't great. If someone's watching this right now and like, oh, what the hell am I doing? Mutual aid's really where it's at right now. Our communities take care of our communities, and we do it in really creative ways. And we don't have time for the loopholes. We don't have time for the proof. We don't have time to like fill out the forms. I have had kids. I've had a couple times I've had kids house sit for friends while the friends stayed with me, so that the kid had a place to stay. Like, we'll pull strings, we'll make it work. I've seen a lot of random strangers on Facebook end up staying in each other's spare room, or staying in the, like, I don't know, heated sunport, whatever it is. I don't know. House. I don't know. But like, we take care of each other, and we bend the rules when we figure it out. So there are a lot of mutual aid groups on Facebook. There are a lot of just like queer connecting groups on Facebook. I'm a millennial. I live on Facebook. I'm sorry. But reaching out that way can often be a lot faster and more effective than trying to go through all of these hoops and figure out the systems. So in an immediate, actual, literal sense, those are the things I would say. And also, we need to burn it down. But that's a whole separate thing. I get that. So what do we do in the moment? How do we handle this? We take care of ourselves. We take care of each other. We have to maintain that we're connected to each other, and we rely on each other.
No, for sure. I think that's amazing. The mutual aid is where it's at, to be honest, as well. Oh.
I can add something to that, especially when you're talking about resources. I think that we need to keep on repeating to people out there about what groups they should be supporting. Because I know that there are a lot of people that want to support and want to contribute, but a lot of times they don't necessarily know what groups to support. It's like, don't contribute to HRC. Like, don't give them money, and they put a report in the summer about exactly this, homelessness, and that housing is one of the main factors that queer youth will experience at some point in their lives. But it's like, their endowment could literally house all the queer folk that are experiencing homelessness across the country. So if there are people that want to, again, either do donations or contribute, don't give money to organizations that have turned into corporations. Give the money to the people that are doing the work in the community, like Mel, like Pride Center, like Quest. Yeah, give us money. We need money. People need money. And also, I think that reaching out to organizations that have been doing work around, again, homelessness. And I said this before, but I want to emphasize the fact that even though there have been entities or organizations that have harmed us and have harmed our community, people that are in those roles also change. And I think that forgetting about the organizations completely is not necessarily the best way to go about it, especially when you're talking about the fact that there is a new generation that is taking into these positions, right? So I think that trying to continue these efforts to work with different organizations that are specifically addressing homelessness, like the National Alliance to End Homelessness, that is an organization that has done great work. They might have done transphobic and homophobic things in the past, anti-Black and brown, but I think that part of the accountability process that we talked about is pointing those things out and inviting them to actually do the work and include the youth. And for resources, I also would like to share that Quest. You can reach out to us, and if there is anybody in the greater Waterbury area that is experiencing homelessness or needs access to healthcare, reach out to us, and we will connect you with social workers that will make sure that you have access to those resources and those services.
For sure, yeah. Oh, go ahead. No. Yeah.
Oh no. Okay, I'll just throw in. So I think also in terms of like resources and the things that we need to do, is that I feel like people who are more privileged, people who have money, who are okay during the pandemic, the people who are still making six figures, being the director of their nonprofits, they need to redistribute that funding. That especially nonprofits who ran off of community programming, and they're not doing community programming as much. They need to hand over those fundings to the community, to mutual aid funds. And I think also with mutual aid funds, I think we need to also gather the momentum for them again, because we did. It started out mutual aid because I helped run CTU mutual aid with Ahmad in the summer. And so in the beginning, we had a very great momentum. And then towards like once we got to winter, it kind of just died out, and the money stopped flowing in, the care kind of, teetered off. And I think half of that is because of the state that we are in, the pandemic. It is overwhelming. A lot of people are, going through traumatic situations. They're stressed, but at the same time, if we don't revive these, like mutual aid is the only programs that are really helping the community, because when we donate to charities and nonprofits, most of the time the community never sees that money. We don't even know where that money goes to. Half the time it goes to, people's pockets who are making, six figures or 60, 75K a year. And they may not even be part of the community, or they may be people who are not as they're not marginalized. So also in terms of the representation that we have, I feel like sometimes the representation that we pick, especially in the state, we pick tokens. And a lot of times we pick representation of people who are, less marginalized in terms of like they're white, but they may be gay, or LGBT. So they'll have an older white person, younger white person be that token, but they won't actually invite the people who actually reflect the real makeup of the community. And I think that's really important.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great point to be made. And that kind of, I'm not sure if I'm okay saying this, but that's HRC right there. And I hope I'm okay saying that, but yeah, I said it. But no, just to reiterate what all y'all are saying, we'd love to be at the level where we can start thinking about, but we can be motivating our city and state legislatures. But that's not an immediate kind of response. That's a long journey to take on. And it's not going to help anyone find housing tonight or tomorrow or even next month. So really, if you need resources right now, I'm just repeating what y'all said. It is going to the people where the community congregates. It's places like Quest, like Q+, like the New Haven Pride Center, like just your city's pride centers, your city's support groups. Just like that's where you're gonna find people who don't want you to fill out a form but are gonna ask if you're hungry and cold. And that really just says it right there. We're almost out of time, so I will wrap it up in a moment, but if anybody wanted to say anything else just as a closing remark, I kind of wanted to throw out the opportunity. I know we've talked about kind of a lot of things, so what to pick as the lasting final word. But yeah, if you had anything else you wanted to add in before I kind of wrapped it up, please feel free to speak now or forever hold your peace.
I'll just add final word, just off of, and I'm sorry, I won't take all the time so Juan can have some time, but just to go off of what Mel was saying in terms of by design, in terms of even having people more representative of the community going to the legislator. By design, by the time that you even get to the podium in the Capitol, you have probably conquered so many microaggressions and and just violence from different types of people before you even get there. So by design, I know I feel guilty sometimes in my job because it's like my clients only have a certain type of like 17 months to get it together, and that's longer than most shelters. Most shelters give you 4 or 5 months. That's it. So you have 4 or 5 months to find a job, enroll in school, and get your whole life together, save money to have housing. And so by design, it is built to burn people out so that we aren't allowed to be compassionate or as empathetic, or our work isn't as sustainable, because by the time we go over all the hurdles and the battles and we get to the podium, we're burnt out and we're out of check. So the same thing with my job. It's like sometimes it's like I can't even meet my client where they're at because I'm like, hey, you got 5 months and then you're on the street. So we need to do it. We need to do this now. And so I can't meet my client where they're at. I think that's also something to keep in thought.
I would like to honor what Mel said, which is that was great. I choose to leave. I think that that made me think about Polly Mary, who I'm not sure if everyone is familiar, but she was, I'm sorry, I apologize. They were great activists, and they were a gender non-conforming trans person that inspire RBG. And I think that when we looked at history that we have not been told, we know that we owe to Black trans folk, and we owe it to queer folk to do this work and fight for them and advocate and use our voices and the spaces that we have to create progress. And I like to share a quote because, again, they are one of my favorite writers, lawyers, activists that did a lot for our community. And they wrote, I don't know whether I'm right or whether society or some medical authority is right. I only know how I feel and what makes me happy. This conflict rises up to knock me down at every apex I reach in my career. And because the laws of society do not protect me, I'm exposed to any enemy or person who might or might not want to hurt me. And yeah, so we owe it to our community, and I think that society owe it to fight for those that have given us most of the rights that we have.
Thank you for reading that quote. I really, really, really like that. Yeah. All right, we're past 5 o'clock, and I feel bad for poor Patrick. So thank you for having this discussion with me today. I really, really, really appreciate all of you. I will be emailing all of you. So yeah, thank you again for joining us for today's program. Remember, the center is here for you year-round with dynamic programming, support services, case management, and more. You can find out about all of our upcoming programming at newhavenpridecenter.org. Don't forget to follow all social media, including at New Haven Pride Center on Facebook, at New Haven Pride Center on Instagram, and New Haven Pride on Twitter. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you will see amazing panels like this one, recorded and stored forever. Finally, if you enjoyed today's program, please consider joining as a member. It's totally free. At newhavenpridecenter.org /join now. Or, as we've been talking about, making a donation to support our programming as one of those places that is local, and you know what it's going towards because you can see it right on your screen. And you can go to newhavenpridecenter.org /donate. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to amazing interpreters as well and panelists, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.